Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Madam Secretary. Let me just tell you, Americans are frustrated. They're frustrated over the handling of Benghazi, what happened when 4 Americans died there. They're frustrated, and sometimes they're downright angry about being what they think being misled about what really happened there, being told that this was a protest over a video, not just for a couple of days, but for weeks on end. And then they're frustrated when they see comments from you this morning when you said, what difference at this point does it make? I'll tell you what difference it makes. It makes a difference when Americans think they were misled about something for political reasons. In the hearing this morning, you mentioned that we were clear-eyed about the threats and dangers as they were developing in eastern Libya. Madam Secretary, if you were really, in your words, clear-eyed about the levels of threat to our consulate in Benghazi or our special mission in Benghazi, then you should have known about Chris Stevens' memo, I believe, of 16 August, that said our consulate could not be defended from a coordinated attack. Questions Americans have is, did he expect an attack? If you were clear-eyed, then why did your department reject the request, I believe, on 7 June for 16 additional security agents, the site security team that would have been funded by DOD, not a DO state expenditure? If you were clear-eyed, shouldn't you have known that there was no real Libyan government to turn to for security assistance? You answered that question for Mr. Meeks earlier when you said there was you were unsure about the Libyan government and their ability to provide that assistance. If you were clear-eyed, were you clear-eyed about the Al-Qaeda's displeasure with who we seem to be supporting during the summer elections, the moderate that was elected? If you were clear-eyed, shouldn't you have known that Al-Qaeda roamed freely in and around Benghazi? As my friend from Pennsylvania pointed out, there were Al-Qaeda flags not just at the protests, there were Al-Qaeda flags flying all over Benghazi. If you were clear-eyed, were you clear-eyed when the Brits left Benghazi because they had the attack? Why did 4 Americans die? What was so important that Ambassador Stevens, if he knew there was a security threat in Benghazi, he went there on September 10th and 11th and gave his life for our country? What was so important for him to go to eastern Libya, knowing all these threats, knowing the memos are clear? And I think you misspoke earlier when you said that you didn't know of any requests that were denied for more security. June 7th, email exchange between Ambassador Stevens and John Moretti when he requested for one MSD team, or actually an additional MSD team, and the reply from John Moretti said, unfortunately, MSD cannot support the request. There was a request made for more security, and it was denied on June 7th. And so, Madam Secretary, you let the consulate become a death trap. And that's national security malpractice. You've said you take responsibility. What does responsibility mean, Madam Secretary? You're still in your job, and there are 4 people at the Department of State that have culpability in this that are still in their jobs. I heard the answer about firing or removing personnel. I get that, but this was gross negligence. At what point in time can our administration and can our government fire someone whose gross negligence left 4 Americans dead in Benghazi? What does the word responsibility mean to you, Madam Secretary?
I think I've made that very clear, Congressman. And let me say that we've come here and made a very open, transparent presentation. I did not have to declassify the ARB. I could have joined 18 of the other ARBs under both Democratic and Republican administrations, kept it classified, and then, just said goodbye. That's not who I am. That's not what I do. And I have great confidence that the Accountability Review Board did the job they were asked to do, made the recommendations that they thought were based on evidence, not on emotion.
There was a lot of evidence, reclaiming my time, there was a lot of evidence that led up to the security situation.
I'm sorry, Congressman.
You mentioned transparency. You haven't provided the call logs of messages, instant messages, during the attack between the Post and the Operations Center. In an era of transparency, will you release these communications between Benghazi, Tripoli, and Washington?
I will get an answer to you on that, but I will tell you once more, the reason we have accountability review boards is so that we take out of politics, we take out of emotion what happened, and we try to get to the truth. I think this very distinguished panel did just that, and we are working diligently overtime to implement their recommendations. That is my responsibility. I'm going to do everything I can before I finish my tenure. And I would also, going back to your first point and about the concerns that people you represented have expressed about statements that were made, I would refer you both to the unclassified version of the ARB, where after months of research and talking to more than 100 witnesses, the picture is still very complicated about what happened that night. There are key questions, I'm quoting, surrounding the identity, actions, and motivations of the perpetrators that remain to be determined, and I recommend that every member read the classified version, which goes into greater detail that I cannot speak to here today.
It was a terrorist attack. It's pretty clear what the motivation was.
Just so the record's clear, because it's been a little while, I didn't ask you the content of those interviews. I didn't ask you the names of who you interviewed. I asked you whether or not you interviewed anyone from July the 31st until August the 8th. And I find it interesting that the FBI will tell us no interviews were conducted before July 31st. That apparently doesn't impact an ongoing probe. But between July 31st and August 8th, it does. Here's the good news. I already know the answer to it. I went and looked at the file. The first interview that I can find is on August the 11th of 2016, which is 11 days after it began, which makes me wonder, on August the 6th, so you hadn't interviewed anyone. You're investigating this alleged Russian collusion with the Trump campaign. You're the lead investigator. You originated the investigation. You're the point of contact. You drafted the document. And here you are before you've interviewed a single solitary witness saying F Trump. Then that same day, your colleague, Lisa Page, wrote, "Maybe you're meant to protect the country from that menace." And you responded, "I can protect the country at many levels." We're not even a week into an investigation that you originated, approved, were the contact for. You hadn't interviewed a single solitary soul until August 11th, and you're already promising to protect the country from that menace, Donald Trump. And then on August the 8th, you still hadn't interviewed anyone. You're 8 days into your Russian collusion with the Trump campaign investigation, and you got another text from your colleague, Lisa Page. "Trump's not ever going to become president, right? Right?" And you replied, "No, he's not. We'll stop it." By the time you promised to stop him from becoming president on August the 8th, how many interviews had you conducted?
Mr. Gowdy, so two answers to that. One, with regard to how many interviews had or had not been conducted, I've been directed by counsel for the FBI not to answer that question. Second, sir, I think it's important to take those texts in the context of how they were written and what they meant.
And someone may ask you that question, Agent Strzok, but I didn't. I asked you how many people you interviewed before you wrote it. If you want to get into context, let one of my other colleagues do that with you. Here's what I want to know. Who's the he and he's not?
He is then candidate Trump.
So when you said, no, Donald Trump's not, in connection with the question, going to become president, what's the it?
Chairman Gowdy.
We'll stop it.
Chairman Gowdy, that text needs to be taken in the context of
I'm asking, look, if you want to have a debate over a two-letter word, we're going to have to do that some other time. What and who did you mean by it?
Mr. Gowdy, as I've stated, that text was written late at night in shorthand.
I don't care when it was written. I don't care whether it was longhand, cursive. I don't care about any of that. I want to know what it meant, Agent Strzok.
It would be his candidacy for the presidency, and my sense that the American population would not vote him into office.
Right. Well, we hadn't gotten to the will yet.
Well, I'm trying to cut to the chase and explain the text.
The will is the American people. Is that right? That's your testimony. The will stop it. You were speaking on behalf of the American people. Is that correct?
Mr. Gowdy, what my testimony is and what I said during extensive asking of this question during my prior interview is I don't recall writing that text.
Are you denying writing the text?
What I can tell you is that text in no way suggested that I or the FBI would take any action to influence the candidacy of
Agent Strzok, that is a fantastic answer to a question nobody asked.
Yeah, Mr. Gowdy, you asked what I meant.
My question to you is
Chairman,
the
the witness
will.
going to be permitted to answer the question posed?
The gentleman will suspend. After the conclusion of Mr. Gowdy's questions, if there's a question that he has not had the opportunity to answer, he will be given additional time to do that. The witness will.
We look forward to that.
Mr. Gowdy's now, and he will not be interrupted by others.
So your testimony.
His time has expired, Mr. Chairman.
Your testimony
by 2.5 minutes.
It's going to be tough for me to get through it if I keep getting interrupted. Your testimony a couple of weeks ago was the we meant the American people, which I found confusing because on November the 7th, which is the day before the election, you said this. You were concerned that those same American people that you were speaking on behalf of might actually elect Donald Trump president. So you said, OMG, this is effing terrifying. I think we know what effing means. I'm pretty sure we have OMG down too. What was terrifying about those same American people you trusted to stop him in August, not stopping him in November? What was so terrifying about that, Agent Strzok?
Mr. Gowdy, I do not have a copy of the transcript. We have not been provided that transcript.
It's your text. It's not the transcript. It's your text.
Mr. Gowdy, what I would say in that is, one, I was not referring to the American electorate at all. The American electorate I respect in their decisions, and their right to vote is absolutely a cornerstone of our democracy. So at no time did I insult or call into question the judgment or the power of the American electorate. What I was expressing in that text is my personal belief and my personal sense of how I saw and what I believed in the potential upcoming administration.
And see, that's what I find so confounding, because in August you blamed the we on the American people, that the American people would stop it, because you don't want it to be you and Lisa Page.
Mr. Chairman,
and you don't want it to be the FBI.
Are we not given 5 minutes to answer questions? We have indulged this harassment 9 minutes.
The chair,
Judiciary and the Oversight Committee. I thought
the gentleman will suspend. The chair, in agreement with the ranking members of both committees, agreed that there would be liberality in the questioning by the chairman and the ranking members of each committee. The gentleman will continue.
What I find confounding,
Mr. Chairman, we expect that liberality on every one of our questionings.
What I find confounding, Agent Strzok, is you were counting on the American people. That was the we you referenced in August when you said, we'll stop it. But the American people didn't stop it. He actually won. So then we go to March of 2017, and you're already talking longingly about him resigning. And then we go to the day that Special Counsel Mueller, well, before we go to that, that's March of 2017. March of 2016, you wrote, God, Hillary should win 100 million to 0. And I'm assuming Hillary would be former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton?
That's correct.
All right. In March of 2016, weren't you investigating her for potential mishandling of classified information?
We were.
Had you interviewed her yet?
No.
Had you interviewed more than 30 other witnesses that wound up being interviewed?
I would have to check the case file, but I'll take your representation.
Well, if she had said something incriminating in your interview that took place months later of her, would she have won 100 million to 0 then?
Likely not, no.
Well, then why wouldn't you wait until the investigation was over before you have her the nominee and winning a general election against an opponent that hadn't even been named?